G'day, Andrew. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Good. How you doing, Grant?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks for joining me. It's good to get in touch with you. I've been following you for a bit, and obviously there's been a bit of correspondence around getting together, etc. Why don't you tell us who you are and why you're a landscape photographer?
Ooh, that's a long story to unpack, but I'm originally from Southern Utah. I started photography maybe in about 2013.
Hmm.
That's when I first picked up a camera, and then I really didn't get serious with it until about 2015, 2016. At that point in time, I took a trip out to Iceland. It's supposed to be the photographer's paradise, and I came away with images I really wasn't happy with, and I kind of wanted to explore different elements.
Sure.
And at that time, I was using like a standard zoom and like a nice telephoto, and I was like, I didn't really have an ultra wide lens, and I was like, maybe I'll try some ultra wide stuff. Um, After that, I started exploring the Milky Way a lot, and I really enjoyed like photographing the Milky Way. But at the same time, very quickly, I kind of realized that as much as I love photographing the Milky Way, and as much as people loves viewing my images of the Milky Way, I
Hmm.
became very bored with it. It was almost like the same subject with a different foreground every single time. After that, about 2018, I moved out to Washington, D.C. after I finished my degree. Um, at that point, I worked for National Geographic, not as a photographer or anything, but just as
Yep.
a in their museum exhibitions. Um, After some personal and financial, regrets that were pretty tough on me, I moved back to Southern Utah, back
Hmm.
with my family, my parents. And at that point, I kind of suffered from suicidal depression at the time, due to kind of everything that's going on and how I was feeling. Um, then I started exploring Zion National Park, which was about 45, 30 minutes away from my home. And they're in Southern Utah. And I just became addicted to it. And really, Zion became this place that distracted me and
Yep.
kind of kept me calm in that
Yeah.
place. And I explored that park pretty much every single day from all of 2019 into 2020. Now I live in Rochester, New York with my partner. She's getting her PhD at the University of Rochester here. And
Okay.
we're just living here and, you know, seeing what comes next.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, what was it that got you passionate about landscape photography in particular? What made you sort of get out in the first place and get out and about? Were you a hiker and you decided to take a camera, or were you somebody that just sort of said, "Oh, I'm going to go and take some pretty pictures"?
It's funny because I hated the outdoors when I was a kid. It was
Okay.
all about video games for me and watching
Yep.
movies, and I just spent all my time indoors. And it wasn't until I went out to Iceland I remember distinctly, I was at this giant waterfall called Dettifoss. And there was a photographer there with like a tripod and a camera and the whole filter set and everything like that. And I was like, that's not the photographer I want to be. I want to be taking photos of people. I want to be traveling to the corners of the earth. And
Sure.
all of a sudden, I just ended up with exactly what he had.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, do you plan a lot? Are you a planner? Are you more spontaneous? How do you go about your shooting?
Yeah. Well, here in Rochester, New York, it's definitely a whim of nature. You never know what you're going to get, if it's going to be, foggy outside, if you're going to actually see some wildlife, if nothing will be happening and it's a gray day. But I usually take two trips out to Zion National Park a year.
Uh-huh.
That's in winter and fall. And I just make the most of my time there trying to like build up my portfolio for competitions, for my own portfolio itself. Um, but around here in Rochester, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Mhm.
Do you think it's important to have goals with your photography, and do you have any?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, well, I just kind of finished a big goal of mine, which was actually releasing my book.
Yep.
Kind of that my book, which is called Heal, kind of chronicles my entire time in Zion National Park
Sure.
over the course of 2019 into 2020. It's been a wild success so far. I never thought it was going to be this much of a success. I always thought it was going to fail a bit, but I mean, it's a huge goal that I accomplished, and nowadays it's really just doing what I enjoy more so than kind of tailoring my photography for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been something that was really hard to learn.
Okay. Talk to me a bit about that tailoring. What is it that you're doing, I guess, that a lot of listeners might not understand about that?
Yeah, so like how I talked about like the Milky Way photography, and really a lot of people loved Milky Way photography.
Sure,
It's
sure.
something that can really easily make you, a photographer in many people's eyes. And it's
Yep.
beautiful work, and it's really hard to do good Milky Way photography. Um, but I just fell out of love with it, and I kind of moved towards more what I called intimate scenes at the time, but now I kind of call smaller scenes that are kind
Sure.
of more abstract. And those scenes really bring me a lot of joy. But I think we're in this time of photography where people are kind of more veering towards abstract and small scenes being more interesting than the grand landscape, which is very interesting to witness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've got to admit I'm doing a little bit of the same. I'm still trying to hang on to some of the grand landscape stuff as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just enjoy finding those little small things that might even be literally at your feet. I stand on rock platforms a lot, taking seascapes, and
Oh, yeah.
you look down, and quite often the rocks and what's down at your feet can be quite interesting.
Absolutely.
That and textures of trees and those sorts of things. I just find those really small worlds, if you like, just fascinating.
Yeah.
What is it about them that make your engines run, I guess?
Well, I think it's not as difficult as something like cityscapes or sunsets or sunrises. There's not much like planning that you need to do beforehand in
Yep.
many ways. It's most like you just show up and then find these scenes if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm just enjoying kind of the easier approach of that kind of photography.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay. When did it start to click with you that it was a means of artistic expression as opposed to a means of just recording things that you see? You there's a definite style that you have, I feel anyway, that leans more towards that artistic creative photography as opposed to that recording, not necessarily just the grand landscape, but just recording, this is what I saw and therefore I'm taking a photo of it. And that artistic side, when did that sort of click for you?
I would say, and I hate to say it, but it's when kind of my suicidal depression started. Um, and I always say, like, unfortunately, I have a lot to thank depression for, because it kind of made me the photographer that I am right now.
Yep.
Um, and during that time, I always made it a point to include context with my images. So I always write a story to each image, create a title for each image, and have that title kind of referenced throughout each story that I create. Um, and it became less of just photographing pretty things or something that caught my eye, and more about like trying to understand the subject through words as well as taking a photograph of it.
Sure.
Yeah. And it was tough, but at the same time it kind of flowed naturally as I was kind of going along throughout that year in Zion.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to me a bit about making the book. What sparked that idea? When obviously a lot of you call it healing, and it's obviously a lot about that journey from suicidal depression to where you are now, and
Absolutely.
how the landscape and photography is sort of, as you said, made you heal. Talk to me about that journey, I guess, from there to where you are now, and how that sort of culminated in the book.
Yeah, well, with heal, it was I really never thought I was ever going to have a book, because I knew it was going to cost a lot of money, and my family got on board pretty quick, because they saw my writing style, they saw my images, and they were like, okay, let's get a book. It's going to make profit, everything's going to work out in the end. And I really, as much as I trusted that in the beginning, I kind of was like, am I really going to make profit on this book? I'm not sure if I trust myself enough in my work. But I went and contacted through Richard Burnaby, who's a very well-known conservation wildlife photographer. He introduced me to Jerry Greer at Mountain Trail Press and Platmus Editions.
Mm-hmm.
And we just got on board like immediately. And luckily, with all of the words that I had written for each of my images, they were already written down. So all I needed to do was literally copy and paste my book into InDesign and just, have at it. Let's choose a cover. Let's figure out this artistic direction on the cover, and let's figure out how we want to, tile this book together. And it was a super simple process. I mean, I hate to say that in the end, I really didn't feel like I was part of the process.
Okay.
Everything just seemed perfectly lined up for me. And it just seemed very lucky to have this situation occur where I have this publisher on board. They're totally on board with what I'm doing. And I just need to copy and paste all my stuff. And
Nice.
In the end, I mean, I'm super proud of this book, and it's everything I wanted it to be and everything my family wanted it to be. And once it made profit, that was a huge point. And when it made profit was when Zion National Park themselves, through the Zion Forever Project, which is a nonprofit organization within Zion National Park, they actually bought almost 300 copies of my book and gifted it to their staff. Yeah. As a holiday gift for getting through COVID. And it was incredible, and that was kind of an affirming moment, finally.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love to hear stories like that where somebody's, gone through quite a bit of adversity and, it's ended up being something, quite successful. It's wonderful to hear. In terms of that personal expression in landscape photography, how do you infuse your own vision and style into your images? What is it that you're sort of trying to do to make those images your own?
I would probably say, I mean, it wasn't until about 2020, beginning of 2020, when I started taking images of ice in Zion National Park. And the ice in Zion National Park is, at least, there's two parts of the park kind of separated by, the road that winds between it. Mm-hmm. And you have the main canyon, you have the east side. And on the east side, it's much higher elevation.
Yep.
And the boulders within that main wash of the east side, the ice that forms in those kind of corridors is just like some sort of ice that just doesn't occur anywhere else. And it's just this beautiful, specific type of ice. Like, it's hard to explain, but it's very concentric lines around boulders and just beautiful movement. And I really kind of got my start with that ice. And I found that it was something that both I loved a lot and something that people also loved to see. Because as much as I want to be that one photographer that's just like, I just want to shoot for myself and I want to enjoy my photos for myself, I always want to please other people as well. I mean, that's part and parcel of being an artist, I think. But
totally. And why would you share it otherwise?
Exactly. But that ice on the east side, that just changed my life.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of getting a bit sick and tired of the Milky Way, and I get where you're coming from. I've also spoken to astrophotographers that are still absolutely fascinated, mainly to get, I guess, in places where nobody else goes, to try and get those unique shots. Mm-hmm. How do you stay motivated to experiment with new ideas and techniques in what you're doing now?
I guess, I mean, I've become obsessed with a place where, I mean, I'm sure a lot of photographers have come obsessed to local places around them and certain places they want to keep revisiting. Mm-hmm. And Zion is my place. And that's just, as much as I do the same routine every single time I go on a trip, I always seem to find new things, new ways of working. But those new ways of working are always centered around places I've been a lot. And I have a very, huge wealth of knowledge of. And I just, it's almost like building upon my portfolio in these places constantly over and over and over again. Yep. Not that I'm making better work, but I'm just experimenting more with what I've already known and what I want to kind of accomplish in the future.
Sure. In terms of that experimentation, obviously that comes with setbacks and failures. Mm-hmm. how do you use that experimentation, I guess, to push the boundaries of your creation or creativity? And how do you learn from those failures and setbacks?
Yeah, well, when I was starting out, I mean, kind of going throughout my entire trip or my entire kind of first experience in Zion, I never really felt discouraged because I was just really, I mean, having a camera in my hand was just keeping me alive, not wanting to drive my car off a cliff or put a bullet through my head. Um,
Yeah.
and at that point in time, it wasn't, the failures, it's almost like failure didn't really become a thing. Like no matter what I was doing, even if I was failing as an image, I was just creating something unique,
Sure.
something interesting,
Sure.
and living another day, which was it was hard. Looking back on it, it's really hard, but in that moment, it's just failure isn't really a thing. It's really hard to describe. It's more like everything's just a little success.
Yeah.
Any distraction will make you through.
Yeah. Okay. And did that, obviously you were, I presume, getting some kind of psychiatric help at the same time. Was there advice to go out and do more, or was it just something that you were doing on the side of that that help that you were getting?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I did not go to any therapy. I wasn't taking any antidepressants or anything.
Okay.
All I was doing was basically my family owned a coffee shop in our little town of Cedar City, Utah, in southern
Yep.
Utah. And every morning I would kind of go to work from about maybe 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then each day, right after work, I would just head to Zion, or head right up the mountains.
Yep.
And that, for me, was some sort of therapy. It wasn't really as much as I'm not trying to like discourage therapy or anything, or
Yeah, sure.
therapy is not worth it. I mean, obviously it is, and it helps so many people, and it's wonderful. But through photography and just being creative, that just kind of helped me through. And really, Zion was there to distract me.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of, I'm interested in obviously that natural environment, and Zion National Park is a big part of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance the desire to capture those unique and interesting images with the need to sort of respect and minimize your impact on the natural environment? Is that something that you're conscious of and thinking about all the time, or is it just something that you just naturally do?
Yeah, so with Zion, it's definitely being plagued by kind of, I would say, it's hard to say over visitation because these places do need to be visited, in order for the park
Yeah.
to make.
Yeah.
But vandalism and the building of recreational cairns is a constant issue in Zion, and I try and do my part of at least reporting vandalism to park rangers, or kicking down every single cairn I can find within the park because they are just a menace. But at the same time, it's the type of work I'm doing. I hate to say it's in the more traveled places. I try and find those small little nooks within places like, I mean, even the East Side Washes is just, it's a place that anybody can jump into
Sure.
and find. But I'm just trying to find the details with them in those places without going too remote, or trying to, tell people about kind of the hidden places around Zion.
Yeah.
Just experiencing what anyone can experience when they visit the park, but just taking a closer look, more detailed look with the ground below my feet.
Yeah, great. And in terms of that, do you see photography as a tool for educating people about their environment? Do you do anything actively around that, or is it just sort of here's the images that I'm taking?
Yeah, well, with the context that I do share and the words that I do share, I do try and, as much as people might not read the words, as much as they'll look at an image, I try to bolster my images with my context, and that context usually revolves around actually, caring about the park, caring about these places, leaving it better. As well as that, a rather well-known photograph within this book and of mine is actually an image of kind of a slab of sandstone there in Zion National Park, and I spent about an hour collecting a bunch of trash within the washes of the east side. And then I took that trash and I basically spelled out the word Zion on the slab of sandstone, took a photograph of it, put that context to it, and in terms kind of became well known. The park itself has shared that photograph, and it's gotten some sort of traction with some kind of outdoor stewardship accounts on Instagram. So there's something being done there, but it's really hard to base my entire photography off of,
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Not absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But just, yeah. It's a tough one though. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, do you geotag? Do you let people know that you're in those well-traveled areas? Or are you a little bit reticent to tell people where you are when you're taking those shots? Or you just say generally Zion National Park and let them find it?
This is something I'd love your take on, because I always tag Zion National Park with any image that I take in Zion National Park.
Yep.
Not because I think the people that are going there to destroy this place aren't necessarily seeing my images and going, oh, Zion National Park, let me go, do whatever I want to be selfish and try and create a name for myself. But how do you approach that? Is that something
I tend not to geotag too much, but if somebody asks me, I'm quite happy to say, I mean, a lot of what I do is in very public, very well-trafficked areas. I try not to take too many risks in terms of particularly the seascape stuff where I'm standing on a rock platform with waves washing over it. I'm pretty careful about the tides and when I do that. And I wear rock fishing boots. So they're like a neoprene bootie that has little cleats on the bottom of it. So it's kind of like ice shoes.
Yeah.
And, so I'm hopefully, and, touch wood, I haven't yet fallen over.
That's good.
Being washed off a rock platform. But the point is, a lot of the places that I'm going are beaches and the rock platforms around those beaches and on the headlands here around Sydney. And they're very publicly accessible, not hard to find. There's some spots which are very obvious when you look at the background of the photo where I've taken it from. So I don't get too excited about that. If I'm going into a national park, though, doing waterfall photography or something that's a little bit, in an area that's a little bit more sensitive, I certainly don't tag where it is. I'll say if I'm, it might be the Blue Mountains National Park, and that's all I'll say, which is a massive, 400 odd hectare area. You can find it if you look hard enough, and if you if you know what you're looking for. But some places I generally stopped geotagging where I am some years ago. I just don't say it, but if somebody asks, I'll tell them.
Yeah, I've always wondered how specific a geotag needs to be, like latitude and longitude. Before and I'm just like, am I doing the wrong thing right now? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. From my perspective, when you're sort of saying where the general area where you are, I think is quite reasonable. Thing is with Google Maps and the way that people can, zoom right in to find out where things are.
Absolutely.
It's not that hard if you're willing to look. What astounds me a little bit though is the comments that you get about where is this when you have actually mentioned in the caption where it is pretty specifically, without this, 6 inches to the left here,
Yeah.
But and people will ask you, where was this? And you go, well, read the caption.
For yourself.
Anyway, it's I think as a general rule, though, I think, as you said, that over trafficked or over visited areas, it is a challenging thing. And I know in the US, I know Zion and a couple of others, they use ticketing and permits and so forth to sort of try and put some controls. So far, that hasn't happened here yet.
Gotcha.
If you're going into a national park, yes, there's a fee that you can buy an annual pass, which I've got, or you can pay at the gate as you go in, unless you're going in when there's nobody there, and then you don't pay. So it's a little bit more free and less restrictive here. But I think a lot of people, in general, do respect the landscape. I think the trouble is that you have the those shots that people see on Instagram or Facebook or wherever, and they want to replicate it. And to replicate it, you end up having large volumes of people there, and it to be honest, that kills the buzz for me. It's
Absolutely
not the sort of photography I want to do.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of different, for kind of the core of my work, because really, I mean, I'm taking just abstract images of ice that you'd never be able to put anywhere, specifically. Back in the day, I used to take some grander landscapes of Zion, but still, then I still tagged, Zion National Park, and I assumed that they were images that everybody kind of gotten at the time, because I was just exploring a place for the first time. So of course everybody's gonna have these same images. I'm seeing the same thing that everybody must else be seeing.
Yeah, there's only so many angles you can shoot it from that look right, and you get the right light, etc., etc. Yeah,
exactly.
I want to talk a little bit about work and lifestyle choice and so forth. You're working full time, I understand, so therefore photography is a bit of a side hustle for you. How do you balance that full-time work and your photography and family life, etc.?
Yeah, well, I work at REI here in the US, which is kind of like an outdoor industry. It's Recreational Equipment Incorporated.
Yep.
I'm a sales lead there, so I'm kind of working within the camp department. So I'm really not too far from the outdoor industry, and I get to talk about photography and talk about people going to Zion and people going to Australia and people going to far-flung places all over the globe, and it's very nice to be in that work, because I have a customer service background for my entire life. I've been in a coffee shop for while it is my family's coffee shop, or it was my family's coffee shop, it was still customer service focused. But with photography here in Rochester, it's extremely slow, because there's no nice way of putting it. Rochester is just a really difficult place to photograph. You either have wildlife photography, or in the winter, it's just really ugly all the time. You have the gray days, you've got brown trees, and that's about it. Sometimes you'll get some fog, sometimes you'll get some snow, but it is just, I hate to say ugly, but it's bad. Yeah.
Not photogenic.
What was that?
Not photogenic.
Exactly.
So in terms of the time that you're spending in the field versus the time that you're sort of spending at home or at work, what kind of percentage is it for you?
I mean, pretty much work's 90%, photography is 10% right now. Unless I'm on my trips, twice a year, I'll go out to Zion in fall and winter for about a week or so. And really that week is just me constantly just going at it each day, doing my exact routines I used to do back in the day. But when I'm here in Rochester, I might go out for an hour, every morning here and there. Usually I find nothing, and I'm kind of okay with it, because I put it in like a nice way, but I'm really obsessed with photography, and not just like actually photographing, but like watching videos and just reading reviews of cameras and lenses. I'm just so obsessed with all of it.
Yep.
You know, I have YouTube on, you know, photography on YouTube constantly on, and I just watch videos constantly. While it is kind of obsessive, it's also very inspirational, you know, and it does make me want to go out and actually photograph, and it never gets dull. And I don't know why that is. You know, I feel like at some point it's got to get dull, you know, watching the same photography videos over and over and over again. But
Yeah, I got to admit, I got a select few that I watch fairly regularly.
yeah.
Probably about 5 or 6. There's about 10 all up that I'll dip into outside those 5 or 6, and
Mm-hmm.
you know those 10 are okay, but occasionally, you know. But I think the fact that they're all doing something slightly different, their styles different, that
Exactly.
helps. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm similar to you in terms of that obsession. You know, it's something that I've turned into my lifestyle now.
Yeah.
But you know, that uh, getting that inspiration and getting that drive to go out and create, I think those videos and the YouTube channels certainly help.
Mm-hmm. And I know, I mean, I saw a poll recently. I don't know if you follow Andrew Atkinson on
Yep.
Twitter. Yeah, he does these polls all the time. But he did one about, like, you know, what keeps you, like, I think it was like something engaged in photography, and it was like practice versus YouTube videos. And I was really surprised by, you know, how little of a percentage YouTube videos got, because
Yeah.
that's how I learned photography. I mean, it's wild to me that, you know, YouTube doesn't touch, you know, people in the same way as, you know, some other people. I
Mm.
mean, practice, of course, is, you know, paramount, but YouTube is just, I can't imagine photography without YouTube.
Well, it's where I learned a hell of a lot of the techniques that I use, both in the field and also in post production. So for me,
Yeah.
you know, I call it University of YouTube, or YouTube U.
Invaluable.
Absolutely. And you know, certainly beyond photography as well. You know,
Mhm.
I've learned a lot from. Uh, if nothing else, I've also learned a lot of things not to do.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
So I guess you're in a place where photography is tough in Rochester. How
Yeah.
far are you having to travel to get a shot that you in one of the trips that you're doing? Where are you going, and how far are you going?
Well, here in Rochester, it's about, I'd say, a 30-minute drive to the place I kind of go the most, which is called Braddock Bay.
Yep.
Because we're right on the edge of Lake Ontario, which is this massive lake here in the US. Um, and it's kind of almost sea-like in its
Yep.
appearance, so it kind of looks like the sea, but it's also a huge area for bird migration. So in kind of the spring, summer months, you'll get tons of birds out there.
Sure.
And really, I've had to kind of put more of an emphasis on wildlife photography than I've wanted to, because here it's just, I'm not going to be able to get those intimate scenes that I can get in Zion, you know,
Sure.
dealing with reflected light and dealing with ice. Um, but I mean, with wildlife photography, and I remember maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I actually bought like a dedicated wildlife lens, and I was like really getting into it. And I was like, I'm you know, I'm going to be a wildlife photographer. And then I realized pretty quick that I was like, you know, I have to have a lot of patience, a lot of
Mhm.
time. You know, I need to really dedicate myself to be a wildlife photographer.
Yeah,
I was like, I can't do
it's a different mindset, I think. Yeah, landscape
that.
is easy in comparison, and I don't want to
Yeah,
denigrate
I agree.
landscape in any way. I love it.
Yeah,
But yeah, to me, wildlife, the patience involved, I guess the pain that you can experience
yeah,
doing that, either sitting, lying, or standing in one spot for what could be hours before
yeah,
something comes along that you can actually shoot.
yeah,
You know, it is a very different mindset.
yeah. I mean, even a park close by, I met a fox that I was just enamored with for months, and I would spend 4 hours at a time just waiting there for a fox, you know, hoping. And then at that time, I was thinking, well, what kind of image am I actually going to get of this fox? And this, is this going to be a contest winning, you know, photograph of a fox?
Yep.
And I think that's what's kind of plagued my mindset now, is just every photograph kind of has to be contest winning, and it's less of an exploration, more of a, let's just try and get the best possible photo. And I think that's kind of where I need to take a step back from that, because that's just not ever going to be good for my
Yeah, it's
photography.
not realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So not sure how to do it. I mean, luckily I've taken a step back from wildlife photography. I've got a whole new kit now, and but I still want to keep it centered to what I do, because I do love photographing animals. I think that thrill of the chase is still something that just you can't really experience in landscape photography to the same extent. I mean, yes, there will be some thrill of chasing conditions, chasing light, but chasing wildlife is like a whole different kind of beast, really.
Definitely, definitely. In terms of you shooting, are you shooting alone, or do you like to shoot with friends? Do you go out with friends much?
Oof, I'm always alone. I'm definitely an introvert
Okay.
for photography. And as much as I'm an introvert, I'm really not good at talking about myself as well. So it's always, even going to podcasts and stuff, I'm always like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can talk about myself.
You're doing okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. But especially when photographing with people, and many times I do avoid people, at all costs.
Okay.
Even if some photographers that want to meet up, months down the road, I might not ever see them again, because I'm just afraid of, that social interaction. And
Wow.
and
Okay.
also I'm really afraid of photographing the same thing that they're photographing, which is why I've never really taken part in workshops or anything like that.
Yeah,
Which
I get fascinated by the variation that you see.
yeah.
You got 5 photographers standing within, let's say, a 10-meter radius,
Uh-huh.
and they're all going to come away with something different, even though they're shooting almost exactly the same thing. I've found anyway. They've got their own take and their own style. Maybe it's just some of the people that I've shot with, but what I've seen is I'm just wowed by the variation you get.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the most recent one that I had was, I kind of told somebody about, um, hey, I'm visiting Zion. How should I explore Zion? What should I do?
Mm.
And I gave them information on what to do. I gave them very broad information, but they were very similar photographer in terms of me and them. And we kind of met up after the fact of photographing within the park, and they came away with very similar images to mine. I was like, well, I mean, I can't use those images. Those are images that they have as well. I mean, these are not contest winning images, that
Mm.
I need to have to fulfill my mind space of photography. So it's tough. It's tough with people in photography for me.
Yeah, yeah. Why contests? What is it about contests that gets your creative juices flowing, I guess?
I think it's the where contests are kind of going right now. I mean, I do focus on the contests that are more kind of geared towards, let's look at the more intimate, smaller landscapes, rather
Sure.
than focusing on grand vistas, which, I mean, natural, I can't remember the name of it, NLPA, Natural Landscape Photography Awards, Annual
Yep.
Photography Awards, the Landscape Photography World Awards. Um, Both kind of put an emphasis on that. And what I really enjoyed about that was, like seeing all these small scenes for once being celebrated. And it's kind of the next thing I need to go to. I've kind of made somewhat of a name for myself in photography with my book, and with some sort of a following on Instagram, though it's not many, it's
Yep.
something. And now it's kind of like going to contests, even being a judge for a contest is what I think is just like the top tier thing you can do as a
Yeah.
photographer.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of what I focus on.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What's your most memorable photography experience?
Oof. I'm actually staring at a photo right now of a great blue heron that I shot in Zion.
Okay.
I titled Self. And this is a heron that when I first visited Zion National Park, I had no idea what a great blue heron was. I thought, what is this dinosaur standing in front of me? This is not an actual bird. This can't be real. And in Zion National Park, I've counted maybe 2 blue herons that exist within the whole park. Here in Rochester, you can throw a rock and probably find a heron, somewhere flying away from that rock. But, with this image that I'm looking at, I mean, I got within about 15 feet of this heron,
Wow.
and it was completely calm with me, the entire time. And over this course of time, this heron kind of became my friend. I always felt like I noticed, this heron would notice me and kind of recognize me over time after every single photograph I took of it. And I'll never forget this moment. And I wish I could really just show the audience this photo, but it's titled Self. You can see it on my website. But it's just this beautiful reflected light behind this great blue heron that's just sitting there, very calm and somber. And just sitting there in that moment, not even taking the photograph, but just being in the presence of that bird was just phenomenal. Just a phenomenal experience. One I'll never forget.
What about horror stories? Have you had any real failures out in the field?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay.
In terms of like creative, of course, there's always a ton of images. We always
didn't pull the focus quite right, or didn't
exactly.
Didn't frame it right, or get the composition
exactly.
wanted.
Yeah. But in terms of like my camera gear failing, that ever happened. I mean, I hate to plug Canon gear, but it's just phenomenal. I mean, I shoot Fujifilm now, but
I've killed a couple of Canons.
yeah, that's impressive. They're tanks.
Yeah, well, they don't like seawater.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, you see, I've never had to deal with seawater before, so maybe one day.
It's not so much the water itself; it's the salt afterwards. That's always the killer.
Corrosion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny because, and I hate to harp on depression and everything like that, but it's really essential to who I am as a person. Back in that time, I wasn't really afraid of falling off a cliff or anything like that, because I was actively trying to go out and experiencing moments like that, to be that close to death. Not in some prideful way, but just in a way that I'm just trying to feel a little closer to death in a just a very strange way. It's hard to comprehend, looking back on it. So, as much as I was trying to, and I remember, speeding through the mountain passes at 80 miles an hour on icy roads and just, whatever, who cares what happens to me? Getting that close to a cliff, trying to shoot this, tree on the edge of the sandstone walls. And yet in those moments, I never really had a failure or taken a bad slip or taken a bad fall. So yeah, it's tough, but that depression really did, I don't want to say prevented those horror stories, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think the practice of photography has taught you about nature?
Ooh, that nature is fleeting, probably more than anything. And I mean, we all know about fleeting light and fleeting conditions.
Yep.
But it's amazing, and really with the types of scenes I really like to photograph, which is ice scenes. They can change in about 10 minutes. Once direct sunlight hits those scenes, they're gone. And it's really kind of made me think about and it's tough because I can never go back in time and experience every single year in Zion, seeing how the ice was in the park every single day.
Yeah.
It just always constantly makes me think that, what if I was here 5 years ago? What would the ice look like then? What photograph didn't I get at that time? I guess in some ways it's taught me regret, but it's kind of a pretty irrational regret more than anything.
Sure. Interested to talk to you a bit about the process for your landscape photography? Was it, get out, get the tripod set up, take your time, find a composition? What was going through your mind when you were actually, setting up prior to and then taking the shots?
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, it was anything that caught my eye. I mean, that's kind of a cliche within photography, but at the
Sure.
same time, it's very important to
Yeah.
photograph what catches your eye. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. But I learned at the time. I mean, I was watching tons of YouTube videos, and as I mentioned about Iceland, and seeing that photographer with the tripod and the camera and the filters, and not wanting to be that photographer.
Yep.
The rest of my
And then
life,
turning into that photographer.
exactly, just immediately became that photographer, and just learning from Thomas Heaton, Ben Horn, all of these
Sure,
big time
sure.
YouTube photographers. And pretty much, I mean, anything that caught my eye, I would set my tripod up first. I would never take a practice shot or anything. I would just want to just hone in on that little scene and carefully compose, and I hate to say just emulate what they were doing, because they're the heroes, and you need to emulate your heroes until you
How you learn.
exactly, until you learn. But yeah, that was basically my process. I mean, just taking it slow, and not trying to not trying to rush nature, I guess, not trying to rush my time zone.
So you got the shot. Are you the type of photographer that just gets the camera home, straight on the computer, get into editing, or do you let things gestate and marinate for a bit?
I'm kind of like in between. I'll get home, generally throw the camera bag on the ground, have a beer, chill
Sure.
for a bit, open Lightroom. Maybe I'm feeling in a little better state because of the beer, throw in the memory card, and then pop in Lightroom. And then at that point, I basically do the same settings on almost every photograph. I don't use presets or anything, but I always send the sliders to like plus 30, minus 30, plus 30, minus 30. Don't know why I do it, but I find my images look best when I kind of follow that same routine over and over and over again.
Yep.
And it's interesting because my photos I never feel like my photos have suffered if I continue to go down that path. So
Yeah,
might as well keep doing it.
I think everyone sort of gets their favorite numbers. That I know I process by numbers quite a bit. I know the percentages that I want, and I know how much contrast is too much or not enough, etc. It's I think that.
Are you?
Go on.
Okay, what were you gonna say?
No, carry on.
Are you a person that just pulls the slider, or do you put in a specific number?
I type the number.
Same way. There we go.
Because well, I'll type it, and if it doesn't look good, then I'll pull the slider around that space to see plus or minus maybe 3 or 5.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
and just see whether or not that makes it look better. But for me, yeah, it's definitely I type the numbers in. It's a lot easier, except with the curves adjustment. They're the only ones that you kind of. But even there, I kind of know where I'm putting the cursor and where I'm clicking. So.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of new and different techniques around using some of those things, but I do a lot for me, and I'm interested in your process as well. But I do a lot of selective editing. Is that the way you edit, or are you doing most in Lightroom and then finishing in Photoshop? What sort of process do you go through?
Yeah, I pretty much do only Lightroom. I don't even know how to use Photoshop really. And I never do like those like masking and radial adjustments and the circles. I really don't know how to do those well, so I just use the bog standard Lightroom settings.
Okay.
The little vignette at the end. It kind of works for me. So
hey, if it works, it works. That's
absolutely.
Are you spending? It sounds to me like you're not spending a lot of time with edits, and obviously, if you're not using Photoshop, not a lot of layers.
Yep, nothing. Easy peasy.
Fair enough. So how much time would you spend on average on a shot?
Oof. I mean, I hate to say at most an hour, which is it's, but I mean, I do
I know people
include.
that spend less than 20 minutes on a shot.
Well, well, interesting. Well, good on them, really. Uh, but I spend kind of equal amount of time on the images I do the words, and it's honestly if I get a good story, it's almost like the image doesn't need to matter as much, which sounds awful for a photographer, but
Yeah.
you know the words are going to tell you as much about the photograph as the photograph will, in my mind. People always say what's the thing, a photograph can give you is worth 10,000 words or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know the saying, but I always think that the words matter as much. And it kind of gives you more context to the image that is lost with just a single image. Yeah.
In terms of printing, obviously you've done the book.
Mhm.
Do you print any prints for your walls or for other people, etc.?
I do, yes. And it's funny because I saw I think a Twitter post on this, or a tweet is what they're called, I guess, where someone was like, is your house filled with photographs of your own work, or is it filled with photographs of somebody else's work? And and it's very interesting to see like all the people that did not fill their houses with their own work. It's like
Yeah,
I have like photographs everywhere of my stuff
yeah.
because I enjoy what I do. But I print quite a lot. Yeah. I've got two printers in there actually. One's basically printing labels right now, while the other prints just the standard photographs for the book, as well as limited edition prints I do on my website. Yeah. Do you fill your house with a lot of your own prints, or?
I've got a few prints of mine. It's not filled.
Yeah.
Plenty of blank spaces to
Yes.
fill. But I do also buy others' work, and from my perspective, I think that in its own way sort of helps me as an inspiration. It's something, and it's when I buy something, a piece from another artist, it's really about, okay, that's an amazing inspirational image that I want to have on the wall. That's the reason why I do it. The prints that I do for home, in a lot of cases, have been test prints to,
Same
you
way.
know, to see how that will work. Okay, yes, I've got the colors right, I've got the shading right, I've got everything where I want tonally, and yep, okay, that's good enough. Let's see it in a frame, stick it on the wall. 3 months later it might come down and be replaced with another one.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm always about like supporting others' work, and photographers always going to need support, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
but it's tough, I mean, I love printing my own work,
Yeah.
and at the same time, as much as I want to, support other photographers, I only have so much wall space,
Yeah.
and even my walls are made of stone, so I can't really get through them. So,
in terms of tips for people that are wanting to get into printing, have you got any tips around making sure that the print looks like what you see on the screen?
that's a tough one because I was actually watching a video today where I think it was Joe Allen, and he was doing a kind of his photography print process on YouTube, and he said he just wants to outsource, to printers that are just going to professionally print
Yep.
versus printing for yourself, because the cost of test prints, the cost of ink, the cost of the printer, the space that a printer takes up,
Yep.
and I feel like that's just as much as it's as much good as you can get from a professional printing service. There's just a lot lost from the actual enjoyment of printing yourself and doing those test prints. And I know it's going to, take some money, but at the same time, when you print something, when you are holding the thing that didn't exist months ago, image wise, print wise, and now you're just holding the physical copy. It's the final stage of the photography process to me. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. Yeah. To me, yes, it's an image, it's a photo, but until it's actually printed, I don't feel like it's finished. I totally
Exactly.
I totally get that.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever hit a creative wall? And if so, how have you handled that?
I would say the wall was probably coming here to Rochester because I just can't
Okay.
do what I used to do, no matter what I try to do.
Yeah.
There will never be a place like Zion around here. And I just kind of accepted it with, okay, let's just, dig my heels in. Let's focus on, working on the book, working on my website, working on printing images, um, working on my Instagram. It's not so much about, like getting very consecutive work, on a very, on a schedule, on like a routine or anything like that. But it's
Sure.
just experience photography when I have the time to do it, when I have the care to do it. A lot of times, back in the day, I mean, I would wake up at 5 a.m. or go to work, go right to Zion. Even if it was a day off, I'd wake up super early, get out the door. Nowadays, I set my alarm and I press snooze and, stay in bed for the rest of the day because I mean, what's the point of going out if the conditions aren't perfect, here? Because really, this place is ugly. So,
Fair enough. Fair enough. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing photographers right now?
ooh, hmm. I would say it's got to be kind of the intimate small scenes kind of area right now. I
Okay.
feel like 5 years ago, I mean, it was dominated by grand landscape photography, and small scenes were just this little bit of photography
It was a
that
niche.
weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's getting hard. So you really have to figure out exactly what you want to do and what you love to do, as well as what other people love to see,
Yeah.
which is, I think, that's a really tough balance to find. Um, I'm grateful I found my own, but I can't imagine, starting to do this right now would be
Yeah.
extremely difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you see the future of photography going?
I feel like it's like a pendulum, you know, it kind of swings towards grand landscapes, swings towards abstract, maybe street photography occasionally. I feel like it's going to swing right back to grand landscapes, with all the advancements in technology of cameras nowadays. It's just it's kind of mind blowing with IAF tracking. That's just blowing my mind. I'm not sure how they even do that. I
Yeah.
mean, my camera is the slowest thing in the world, so you know, but uh, yeah, I feel like it's just going to swing back towards that kind of. Well, the other issue that's kind of got me worried is, I guess it's not really an issue, but it's more of like a concern, is AI photography
Yep.
right now. Not sure what that's going to look like for competitions, or if raw verification will be necessary for everything.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Uh, I don't think it'll stop people going out and being creative.
Mhm.
And it might stop some people from, you know, doing what they would naturally do anyway. But from my perspective, it's probably going to have an impact on commercial photography first and foremost.
Yeah.
The ability for an organization or a marketing executive or whatever to type in a few words about what he wants and
Yep.
kind of come up with something that is pretty close to that concept. If nothing else, he's cut out that concept art initiation and he could hand that to his creative director and say, okay, this is kind of what I want.
Thanks.
To a as the technology moves forward, as the marketing space realizes what that means for their industry, I think it's going to change quite significantly. And I can see a time where you could have even a still or maybe a video image uh, sort of campaign presentation, which changes and evolves based on the data that's coming back from customers, i.e., how long they're looking, where they're looking on the screen, etc.,
Thanks.
etc. Because they'll be using technology like eyeball tracking, etc., using your phone's camera.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it's scary.
And this is the thing, it is scary without you switching all of your sensors off on your on your phone. That little device, it's already listening to you and giving you search based on what it's heard you say, giving you search suggestions. I can see a time where that advertising could even be tailored directly to you, because it's using an AI program to say, all right, well, he didn't like this, but he liked that a little bit more, or he liked this other campaign that we did before. So let's blend a bit more of that in and use that data to actually get the AI to produce an image that makes you stop, makes you look, makes you click the button. And yeah, I can see that happening, because
Yeah.
there's money to be made and people and money to be saved,
Mhm.
because people will say, well, I don't need a photographer now.
Yeah.
If I want to, I don't even need to pay models. I can have a computer generated model. So for those industries in the commercial space, I can see some real threat. Things like real estate photography, well, if you AI generate an Airbnb listing or whatever, it's kind of not reality. So when your
Nope.
customer turns up, they go, "That's not like the image." So that I don't think real estate photography and that sort of thing is going to go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can certainly see um, brands like certain brands of cola or certain brands of running shoe or whatever getting into this in a big way and cutting out a whole swathe of costs for themselves. Because at the moment, when you look at those campaign build costs, that is actually going to be a significant saving just by typing some words.
That's spooky stuff.
Yeah. A bit of a glimpse into the future from my
Exactly.
perspective anyway. What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm just obsessed. So if I'm not out shooting, I'm probably watching a YouTube video of photography, or I'm reading a book, or you know you know kind of going through all the details on new camera specs, new lenses, trying to get with the news of everything.
Sure.
I mean, and of course, I spend time with my partner. We go out to dinner all the time, but really, I mean, photography is what I do, and just kind of what my mind needs to be okay, really, nowadays.
Yeah, that's great. Who are the photographers that you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
Ooh, I mean, Eric Erlenbush, EE Visual on Instagram for sure.
Yep.
He just do you follow his work at all?
Definitely, yeah.
I mean,
Stunning
one
stuff.
of
Yeah.
the foremost in intimate landscapes there in southern Utah. Um, let's see, Martin Gonzalez, of course, Alberto Rodriguez.
Yep.
Yeesh. Oh, and Jack Crone, AK39 on Instagram. Just
Okay.
I always and I've told him this multiple times, but he's probably my favorite photographer of all time, because every single image I come across on his Instagram is just like the best image I've ever seen. Till the next one.
Yeah.
I don't know why it is, but he has this certain eye for photography that's just completely different to everybody else's, and I just appreciate it so much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one more question for you, and it's probably the most important question that we've got to get to the bottom of with landscape photographers. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Absolutely love it. Give it to me.
Okay. I'm surprised with a surname like Baruffi.
Yeah, right. Very Roman name, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, how can you not like pineapple on pizza? That's sweet with that salty, it's perfect.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for taking the time out to talk to me today, Andrew. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to know you a little bit better. And thank you so much for sharing so much about yourself. Where can people find your work?
Well, I appreciate it, Graham. Thank you so much. You can find my work at Andrew Baruffi on Instagram or andrewbaruffiphoto.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.